Immunologist at University of Arizona. Okay. By the way, I'm really excited you can join us today because I heard you on KCBS and I thought you did the best explainer yet in very simple terms. Just what's in that vaccine, and when it goes into your body, what does it do, and what does it make your body do? And just all that was like so easy to understand. So I was like, yes, I got to get them. So thank you very much.
Happy to be on. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, all right. We have a total of about 11 minutes, I think, and
Okay.
we do have a lot to get through. I mean, I think the segment you did with them was probably like half an hour or something, and we don't have that much time. But so in addition to that, just real quickly, I want to, talk about, why does effectiveness wane? What happens then when you get a booster? Will we have to keep getting boosters? What's the optimal time to get a booster? Let's see. And then maybe also touch on, do kids need a booster? Especially, that CDC study that said maybe 42% of kids had already been infected. Blah, blah, blah. Can vaccinating kids help prevent variants? And then also the new antiviral pills by Pfizer and Merck. Any potential danger there, potential to trigger vaccine-resistant variants or danger to pregnant moms and unborn babies. Is there anything else you want me to touch upon that I haven't mentioned here in 11 minutes?
No, that's going to be hard to get through 11 minutes, but I'll try to be succinct.
Yeah, I mean, again, don't worry about it. If I don't get to them all, that's totally fine too. All right, I'll talk to you in a minute. Thank you so much.
Okay, sure.
Building a better Bay Area. Moving forward, finding solutions. This is ABC 7 News.
Hi there, I'm Kristen Z. You're watching Getting Answers live on ABC 7, Hulu Live, and wherever you stream. We ask experts your questions every day at 3 to get answers for you in real time. Today, we have a food safety expert from the USDA to talk all things turkey and Thanksgiving. Also, before you shop on Black Friday, we have a financial expert to help you get the most out of the experience with a few simple must-dos. But first, CDC and California public health officials are waging a huge campaign right now to persuade more Americans to get the COVID vaccine or get the booster if they got the original shots more than 6 months ago. But many people have questions or concerns, and sometimes it's because they don't have enough information or don't fully understand what the vaccine can or cannot do. So joining us today to answer your questions and help make sense of vaccine basics, Dr. Deepta Bhattacharya, an immunologist at the University of Arizona. Dr. Bhattacharya, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Kristen.
I just want to say I heard an interview you did recently and thought you provided such a clear explanation of vaccine science. I definitely wanted you to get on this show and help our viewers. So let's start with this. What exactly is in the Mederna and Pfizer vaccines?
Both the Mederna and the Pfizer vaccines are called mRNA vaccines. So to back up just a little bit, the coronavirus is made up of RNA. It's a type of genetic material that's a little bit different than the DNA that makes up our genomes. And so the mRNA vaccines just take a small piece of what the virus normally makes and then instructs the cells to express or turn on this protein called spike protein. So basically tells your cells to make just the spike protein. And that's enough to tell the immune system that something's wrong and they should respond to it. But it's not the entire virus genome so that you're not making new virus particles. So what those mRNA vaccines do is they instruct your cells to make this thing, and then the immune system starts to respond.
So then once it starts doing that, what happens when it actually meets up with the invader? That is, if you're actually exposed to the coronavirus vaccine, or I should say virus.
To the virus, yeah. So, I mean, the key thing here is you want your immune system revved up and going and ready before you're exposed to the virus. And so it's really all about timing. So what the vaccines do is they trigger a couple of different parts of your immune response. One of them is that your immune system starts making antibodies that stick to the spike protein. So antibodies are proteins that are sort of sticky. They try to glom onto the virus, and ideally, if they're working well, what they do is they prevent the virus from infecting your cells. So that's one thing that happens. Your immune system also revs up a different type of response made up of T cells. And these cells are just patrolling and looking for cells that have been infected by the virus. And if they see something that gets them suspicious, then they'll kill those cells before the virus has a chance to replicate and then start spreading across other cells.
Got it. So they will search and destroy, right? Okay, and how long after you get the shot does your immunity peak, if you will?
Usually peaks a couple of weeks, a week or two after you get the second shot for the first primary series. And if you get a third dose, then it's usually about a week after that. So it takes a little while to get going, but it certainly is a lot faster than if you got infected by the virus in the first place. So I think, normally if you get infected by the virus, it can take a couple of weeks before your immune system knows that there's something wrong to get going. And again, the whole purpose of the vaccine is to have your immune system ready ahead of time in case you're exposed to the virus.
Got it. So it starts fighting for you on day one, or the first, second that it sees it. Okay, so when does it start to wane? And when does it kind of hit bottom and plateau?
That's a complicated question. I mean, one of the things that happens in really every immune response, whether it's an infection or a vaccine, is you make a whole bunch of antibodies right at the beginning. But those antibodies aren't really of the best quality. And so they don't stick very well to the virus. And so they kind of bounce on and off. But you make so many of them that it's actually probably enough to protect you. But then what happens is that there's this process of culling some of those antibodies that aren't sticking very well. And the cells that produce those not so great antibodies start to die off. And so then what you're left with are only cells that produce the best antibodies, meaning the ones that stick the best to the virus. And so that even though those antibody levels are declining, that really doesn't mean that immunity is waning. What it means is that your antibodies are becoming more efficient at protecting you. So when we look at these vaccines, they've waned a little bit. And if you look at it against Delta, it's waned a little bit. So, it has come down a little bit from its peak. But I think the bigger problem really right now is the Delta variant. And there's a few reasons for that. It has some mutations that escape some of those antibodies. But the bigger problem really is that it just replicates really quickly. And so it just takes more to protect you. It's one of the reasons that we're talking about booster doses right now, is really because of the Delta variant, more so than waning of immunity per se.
Got it. So once you get the booster shot, it goes in your body. And then what does it do at that point?
Yeah, it makes an enormous number of more antibodies and T cells. And so you're really revving up that set point to a higher level than it was after just 2 doses. And it seems like you might need that against the Delta variant.
Do you think
but the trials, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I do apologize. I was wondering if this means we might have to get a booster every 6 months, if it continues to wane. At what point would your body no longer need additional shots to defend itself?
It's really hard to predict that. And what I feel like is now, if you look at the data from the 3rd doses and take what we know about, how high it's gotten these antibody levels and, how long it's likely to come, it'll take before it comes back down again. I think it'll take a long time. So really what it is right now is that the ball's back in the court of the virus and, it's sort of up to it to what it decides to do next. And so, will we need booster doses every 6 months? I don't think we would need it because of waning immunity. The frequency of boosters that we need, I think, is going to have more to do with what the virus does and how it evolves and how it changes. And that's very, very difficult to predict.
Is that why you and many doctors are urging for vaccinations for children? Does that play a role in preventing these variants or potentially dangerous, new variants to emerge?
Yeah, for sure it does. I mean, I think one of the things that we've learned is that the vaccines, in some ways, that this is unexpected. A nice positive is that the vaccines are doing a pretty good job of preventing infections outright. So even the most pessimistic estimates would say that the vaccines are preventing something like half of Delta infections. And so obviously, if you're not infected, you can't transmit it. The virus doesn't have any new opportunities to mutate and whatnot. But even in the people who do get breakthrough infections, meaning post-vaccination infections, you clear the virus out more quickly than had you not been vaccinated in the first place. And so there's just fewer chances, less time for the virus to pick up mutations that would allow it to escape and generate new problematic variants. Okay. So that's, again, one of the reasons why, yeah, I do think that it will make a meaningful difference to have children get vaccinated.
All right. Of course, those vaccinations are underway for 5 to 11-year-olds. And here in California, about 10% of that age group has now gotten the first shot. Many parents are still reluctant, though. And a CDC estimate suggests 42% of kids have already been infected as of June. One, do you think that is the case? Does that number sound right? And two, if that is the case, what does that suggest about whether kids really need the vaccine?
That number I don't, it's hard to know what to make of that number. I mean, I think when I first heard it, it sounded a little high to me, it sounded a lot high to me. These estimates, when they're not made on random samples of the population and they're not really representative of the population you're trying to estimate, then you have to take it with a little bit of a grain of salt. What I would say is that I'm sure there are some communities that have gotten hit hard by COVID, that it could well be 42% or even higher in some communities. But if you look at it across the country, I mean, I think it's really hard to know what it is. And 42% sounds a little bit high to me. One thing I would say is that, for people who have recovered from COVID, and I imagine children are going to be the same, is that there is some degree of immunity. It's just really, really variable from person to person, and it's hard to know exactly where you're at. So one of the things that we have learned is that for people who have recovered from the infection and then get a vaccine dose, that really maxes out the immune response. And so to the extent that we've been able to tell, that's sort of the highest degree of immunity you can get, and it gives you further protection. Whether or not a second shot even after that helps anymore, I think there's some debate about that. I mean, I'm not very convinced that a second shot gives you too much more than that first shot. But one shot after having recovered from an infection, I think, makes a big difference.
I see. So if you're recovered, you probably do not need the booster, right? If you got the full vaccination after you had it and recovered from it, that's probably enough.
Yeah, I think so. We have no evidence to suggest otherwise.
Okay. So what is the optimal time to get your booster? For example, should somebody get it as soon as possible, or should they maybe wait until they have a big gathering coming up or somewhere where they know they will face more exposure than usual?
Yeah, I think this is one of the tough things because there's a difference between what is immunologically optimal versus what might be happening in your community. And I think these are the things you have to balance. From an immunological standpoint, I mean, what we've learned both from this virus and from things we've learned through decades of viral immunology is that the longer you wait, the better that booster shot works. And there's a number of reasons for that. But I think that then again has to get balanced with what's happening in your community. Unfortunately, here in Arizona, the cases are really skyrocketing. And so I think in this case, you might want to get that shot a little sooner rather than later. But in places where community transmission is really low, then I think you can afford to wait a little bit before that booster shot.
All right. So Bay Area folks who cannot get an appointment until close to Christmas time, you would tell them not to panic, right? They're probably okay there. Okay. Last question, because we're running out of time, but I do want to address this. A lot of talk about the new antiviral pills by Pfizer and Merck that will hopefully be approved soon by the FDA. Any potential danger there? Are there any potentials there to trigger vaccine-resistant variants? Can you talk about that?
The mechanism by which those drugs work is really distinct from the vaccines. I don't think it'll affect anything as far as vaccine escape variants. Could you get drug-resistant variants? I mean, theoretically, yes. But if you really look at how long the infection lasts and how much time the virus has to evade those drugs, probably not. Where you really start running into problems is things like HIV, which cause infections for an entire lifetime, and the virus has just a lot of shots on goal. That's not really how this virus works. And so most of the people who study viral evolution don't think this is going to be a huge problem.
Okay, Dr. Deepta Bhattacharya, I wish I had a whole half hour with you because I have so many more questions, but I appreciate you taking the time today before your Thanksgiving holiday to help us learn more about these vaccines. Appreciate it. Take care.
Thank you for having me, Kristen.
All right, coming up next, we are going to talk about a different kind of holiday safety. We're talking about cooking for Thanksgiving. We have an expert for the USDA with what you need to know when you head into that kitchen. We'll be right back. right? All right, folks, enjoy this lovely view of the Marin Headlands and the bay. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We've addressed staying safe during the Thanksgiving holiday when it comes to COVID, but don't forget about the meal. From cooking the turkey to putting away all those leftovers, we have you covered. Joining us now is Meredith Carruthers from the USDA, a food safety expert. Thank you so much for joining us, Meredith, today. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks so much for having me. It's great to talk about food safety with you guys.
I know, it's what we're all thinking about. Let's start with the star of the show, the turkey, of course. Now, most of us get it frozen. So what is the best way to thaw the bird? When should you start the process? And please don't tell me I'm already too late for Thursday.
So you might be a little too late for Thursday if you wanted to, thaw it in the refrigerator, but don't fret. There's still a possibility of thawing it safely in time. It's safest to do it in the refrigerator because it'll keep a safe temperature throughout the entire thawing process, but it does take quite a long time to do it. So if you have a turkey that's over 15, 20 pounds, you might be cutting it close or a little too late for Thanksgiving Day itself, but there is the cold water method, which involves submerging the turkey in cold water, changing that water about every 30 minutes. That will ensure that it continues the thawing process. It still will take about 30 minutes per pound. So it's still going to take, a few hours or more, but it's faster than the refrigerator and will get your turkey thawed faster than, that refrigerator. You can also cook it from frozen if you find you're really in a bind on Thanksgiving Day. It's safe to put it in the oven frozen. It'll just take longer to fully cook it.
Really? And the results can be just as good?
It depends, but oftentimes, yes.
Okay. All right. If you plan on brining the turkey, which a lot of people are doing, what steps should you take?
So it's best to have your turkey fully thawed to brine just to help ensure that the brine is going to go into that, the skin and into the actual turkey properly. But you can still brine even if your turkey's partially frozen. Biggest thing to remember is that the turkey has to be brining at a safe temperature. So it has to be in the refrigerator in the brine, or it needs to be in a cooler with ice or something that's going to help keep it below 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Even if you're in, colder temperatures, not best to keep it outside in the garage or anything like that. Refrigerator, cooler are going to be your best bets.
Okay. Look, none of us want undercooked turkey, could get sick, or overcooked turkey doesn't taste good. So what is the ideal temperature and cooking time?
So we definitely recommend to have a food thermometer on hand. That's going to be the best way to tell if your turkey has been fully cooked to a safe internal temperature without overcooking it. Pop-up timers are a great tool to use. However, we actually recommend using a food thermometer in 3 places in your turkey.
Oh.
And a pop-up timer is only going to be testing it in that one place, the thickest part of the breast. So 3 places of your turkey need to come to a safe internal temperature of 165 degrees. It's the thickest part of the breast, the innermost part of the wing, and the innermost part of the thigh. Kind of as the screen is showing, you want to stick it into those 3 places. And once all 3 of those places have come to that safe temp of 165, then your turkey is done.
And it'll continue to rise a little bit after you take it out, right?
Yes, it oftentimes will. Just to make sure that it is absolutely safe, it's best to come to that 165 before you let it rest, just to really make sure that all those bacteria are going to be killed.
Okay, here comes a tough one. To stuff or not to stuff?
So we don't recommend stuffing if you can avoid it, just because it creates more of a risk than it does, doing it safely. It's a little more complicated if you're going to do it safely. So best not to do it. But if you're going to cook a stuffed turkey, we recommend not stuffing it until right before you put it in the oven. That helps make sure that no extra bacteria are going to multiply inside that cavity, because bacteria really like moist, warm environments. And that's exactly what the inside of that turkey will be. And then you also have to make sure that the stuffing comes to a safe temperature of 165 as well. That's because as it's going in the cavity, it's touching all of those raw poultry juices. It essentially becomes part of the turkey. So that stuffing has to also reach 165 degrees.
All right. Deep frying has become pretty popular, and I got to admit, I've had it. Oh, the crispy skin is really good, but it's also a fire risk. So what are the things to keep in mind to do it properly, prevent the danger, and ensure ideal temperature and cooking time?
Of course. So a lot of frying, information, or a lot of frying recommendation comes from personal safety. It is a little more risky to deep fry a whole turkey just because it's so big. There's lots of hot oil that could definitely cause burns. Biggest thing is that your turkey should be fully thawed before it goes into that fryer. The ice crystals on a frozen turkey will interact with that hot oil. They'll vaporize into steam and can cause it to bubble up and bubble over and potentially, splatter, and that would not be good. So it's best to make sure your turkey is fully thawed, lowering it in slowly, and then monitoring it throughout the rest of its time. Thawing or deep frying is going to help cook it a little faster than something traditional like the oven, but making sure that when you pull that turkey out of the oil, you give it a few minutes to rest and then take that internal temperature to make sure that it still has reached that 165, same as any other cooking method, before your turkey is considered safe.
All right, Meredith, we only have about 30 seconds, but I do want you to tell us where are the hidden dangers and the icky stuff that can hide in a kitchen that people should keep track of as people come in and out during Thanksgiving.
Definitely. So first things first is to wash your hands. Anytime you touch food, anytime you're moving things around, always keep your hands clean, because that's ultimately one of the biggest ways that bacteria can transfer around your kitchen. And you can't see these bacteria, so you always have to be vigilant about that. In one of our observational studies, we found that spice containers were contaminated with poultry bacteria, or bacteria from raw poultry. So definitely, washing your hands, keeping your utensils and your surfaces clean, and following all those will help prevent that spread of bacteria around the kitchen.
All right, Meredith Carruthers from the USDA, thank you so much for sharing your insight and expertise with us.
Thank you. And if you have any last minute questions, give us a call on our meat and poultry hotline at 1-888-674-6854. We are open on Thanksgiving Day. We're here to help.
Excellent. All right. Happy Thanksgiving.
You too.
All right, coming up next, ready to hit the stores after you eat? Oh, maybe the internet for some Black Friday deals? A financial expert will be joining us to help you plan out your shopping. We'll be right back. All right, everybody, let's see what lovely shot our director has for you. Wow, it is the Bay Bridge. And look, you can see that late afternoon sun. Gorgeous. Enjoy. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Supply chain crisis or not, Black Friday is coming with all sorts of deals for shoppers looking to score discounts on holiday gifts. Now, before you hit the stores or hop online, there are a few things you should do. Sam Gaeta with Define Financial Planning joins us now with information you could use. Hi, Sam.
Hey, how you doing?
Doing great. Black Friday always scares me a little bit, to be honest. That's why we wanted to have you on to get us all ready. But before we get into your best tips, I do want to ask you if the supply chain crisis may have an impact on either prices or the selection of goods this Black Friday. What do you think?
I think it does. I mean, that's why we're seeing kind of this early Black Friday deal structure, if you will. You know, I think not only businesses are concerned about that, but logistics companies are concerned about just getting things to consumers this year. And I think it's certainly a top priority.
So which types of items may be affected most, perhaps hardest to find or get on time?
You know, I think really everything is getting hit hard, but I would say most kind of specifically is Christmas goods, right? Things like toys, things like furniture are really getting hit the hardest. But that's coming back around, and I think starting early is a good idea for you if you're spending or planning on spending on some of the larger toys or furniture pieces to start early this year.
All right, which is where Black Friday comes in, but do give us some money tips, things to watch out for and things to look for.
Yeah, well, I think one of the problems with telling everybody to start early is that sometimes that creates this like frenzy feeling or like kind of fear of missing out, if you will. And you got to be conscious of that. So make sure you go into the shopping season with the plan. I would itemize your Christmas gifts this year and make sure that you're staying on budget. Also, don't impulse buy. Just because you see something and you want it doesn't necessarily mean you should buy it right away. A lot of times we think we can't get something, but we actually can. So, do your due diligence, be patient. But if you start now and start planning now, we feel that you have the highest probability of success.
All right. What about staying on budget? Any advice?
Yeah, well, I would just say, write it down. Make sure you're itemizing your expenses. Look at what you're spending for Christmas and make sure that you're staying on top of that. I find that, this particularly towards the end of the year, that's when people are starting to go over budget is in December, which this is actually some good news is that if you can start now and start kind of spreading out these expenses over the next 30 to 45 days, it's going to be better for your budget and it'll help you stay on track. You're not doing a big, huge thing right up front.
What about scams? What should people be looking out for?
Well, scams, the problem right now is that a lot of people are shopping online, and online shopping can create scams. So I would say just be conscious of who you're buying from. I mean, we're even seeing this downline through Amazon. Just make sure that, who you're buying from, or if it's a reseller on Amazon, it's a legitimate company. Just you don't want to get something at your front door that you didn't actually order and it'd be the wrong item for Christmas. So I would just be conscious of that.
We've been moving towards giving fewer gifts that will just be thrown out afterwards after a few months in favor of gifts that last, right? What are some ideas for things or experiences that fall in that category, things that last?
Well, I'm a financial planner, so my initial reaction is a college savings plan. A 529 plan is a great way to give to your grandchild and make it a long-lasting gift, right? I mean, you can put this money in, you get some incentives from the state of California, if you're in California, to do so. And it's a great vehicle to not only, give a gift where you don't have to worry about the supply chain bottlenecks, but also it's something that can compound and grow and become even more impactful in the future.
With a kiddo in college, I certainly understand that advice. Good one. All right, Sam, don't go away, because while we do have to take a short break on the air, we can continue this conversation on our streaming platforms. We'll be right back.
Great.
All right. I want to ask you, what kind of advice do you have for procrastinators so they don't come home, end up empty-handed?
Yeah, I don't know if there's some good ones, but or some good advice, I should say, but I assume that's gonna take effect. Companies are trying to plan for this, and I will say, like, some of the supply chain bottlenecks in particular are definitely starting to get better, which is really, really good news, not only for some of this inflation talk, but also for getting gifts to people in time for Christmas. But I would say, try, if you can think about it now and start writing some things down and maybe just allocate some time, it's a great thing to do, to try to avoid procrastinating.
All right, we talked about scams a little bit, but I want to follow up with asking, what do you do if you realize afterwards, oh, I think I've been, victimized by a scam?
I will say that credit cards are sometimes not a great thing because we tend to overspend with credit cards. But one thing that credit card companies offer that I think is a very, very big incentive is the ability to dispute transactions, right? So if you're utilizing a credit card during your holiday spending, it'll help kind of put some guardrails up around some of these scams, because if it is something that is actually a scam, well, you can dispute it with your credit card company, and a lot of times they'll take care of it and refund you way earlier than you would if you were to do it directly with a debit card.
Could you get your money back if you did PayPal or Venmo?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know if Venmo particularly. I know PayPal, depending on the type of structure, like when you're actually making a payment to a vendor, that is considered kind of like a credit card transaction.
Okay. Yeah.
So that will, that'll work, and that'll, PayPal has been pretty good from what I understand and from what clients have told me in the past about getting money back.
All right, Sam, we're out of time, but do you have a website to send folks to if they want more info?
Yeah, if you want more information, www.definedplanning.com. And thanks for your time.
Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving. And thank you so much for joining us on this interactive show, Getting Answers Today. We'll be here every weekday at 3 o'clock on air and on live stream answering your questions. World News Tonight is coming up next, and I'll see you back here at 4.